Welcome to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And today I'm thrilled to have on the show Adam Rehberg of Adam's Apple Games. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I feel like I said Adam about 8,000 times in that intro, so I'm going to hopefully not start a stutter as I say it repeatedly throughout this whole thing.
No problem at all. I went for the name with the company name as well, so I kind of led you into the trap.
Yeah, it kind of takes some level of audacity to put your name into the company's name itself.
Well, there's me that consists of the company, so I said, well, what better way to just start with who I am and be the personal brand in the company, and there's also Adam's Apple, kind of has some symbolism to it as well. So,
well, how do you think the Adam's Apple is representative of your company, your oeuvre, your whole shtick?
Well, there's actually a funny story. So, my family growing up, whenever you got bopped in the head, they say you got hit in your apple or whatever, and I don't think anyone else really calls it that.
No.
So, nope. So that's where I came up with it, and I think my friends and family were just sick of me bouncing company names off them, that they said, yeah, go with it.
Okay.
And I did.
Yeah, now I get it. So it's the head, not specifically that part of your neck that is protruding when you're a lot skinnier than I am. All right. Well, Adam, to start this out, for people who aren't familiar with your history, how long have you been gaming, and when did you decide to take the plunge into publishing games or even designing games? Because I imagine that started first.
I was family gamer growing up, right? The Clue, the Monopoly, the classic story, but hardcore video gamer. We had all the systems. Our parents actually had to restrict us from gaming on the weekdays, so we could only game on the weekends. And so there was this just amazing kind of nostalgia and growing up. Oh, I'm sorry, that'll be a dog shaking.
No worries, this is a dog-friendly podcast. Okay,
good. His name is Gus.
Okay.
So growing up, yeah, it was, we were all about it. Video games. Even to the point where in college and after college, I started trying to design an app, and I'm like, oh, this will be fun. Do some game design. Kind of have engineering mind and problem solving mind. Went down that path for about a year, and it was a lot easier to do the testing and learning on the tabletop, and really, really, really found out that I loved it and just loved the community. Submitted a game design to the Cards Against Humanity Tabletop Deathmatch Season 2, and that's essentially where I got my first exposure as a designer in the industry.
When was that?
That was, 2015 or 2014, I think, actually.
All right.
Really a fascinating thing. They flew 8 designers out to Indianapolis and basically said, pitch your game in front of a bunch of industry experts, including the Cards Against Humanity team, and just picked who they thought deserved to be published and gave them a boatload of money, I think it was $10,000 to go make their dream a reality. So really cool thing that they did to support indie designers, and just kind of jumpstarts, even if you don't win, it jumpstarts kind of your exposure and your presence in the industry as a designer.
And because I have to chase the rabbit and get to have a degree of familiarity with you, what were some of the games that were real touchstones for you growing up? The video games, because I'm a hardcore, well, I don't know that I am currently a hardcore video game player, but I grew up as one. And I think there's certain video games that kind of inform who you end up becoming if they are the games you really latched onto in your youth.
So definitely the classics. So I had the Mario, the Donkey Kong, and then there was a lot of JRPGs in there as well. So the Final Fantasy series. We had this just hilarious system where my older brother would be the one that would actually make the decisions and do the boss fights in the game, but I would do the grinding for him while he was doing other important things. So
he's like, you know what? I need every single rage from the Velt, so you and Gao have got to sit here forever, and you're just going to be racking all these up.
Yes, you know it, and Sabin was our guy. So we were just pummeling everyone, the entire time. But so pretty much played like all the JRPGs, that you've probably ever heard of. But then big into sports games too. So like one that I throw out there was like Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball. Like that thing, like, oh my gosh, played so much of that growing up, and just, that was like baseball is America's pastime, right?
Right.
And this was my pastime growing up when we were playing baseball. So,
were you guys big sports fans, or was it just the game itself?
Both. I mean, we were sports fans. I definitely dabbled into, plenty of other genres as well. But for whatever reason, like we would buy the sports games that were popular and out, and like that, well, it was a ton of fun. I mean, it was 3 boys in my family, so it was really competitive. It was always like a head-to-head, matchup. But yeah, it was really cool. And then let's see, like maybe there was the GoldenEye phase for sure.
Yep.
And I don't know, it kind of went all over the place as soon as I think PlayStation 2 hit. So we were big into, I shouldn't say this, but we were big into like, naughty pirating the games. And so we'd have like all the games for free. And that gives you access to all kinds of genres of games, which I think really opened my mind to, just trying new things in the gaming space.
That's interesting because you have so many different genres and interests here. I mean, that may seem like it's a mutually exclusive thing to have someone really interested in JRPGs, but also into sports games. And I totally get it. Like, I wasn't a sports guy at all growing up. My family weren't really into sports, but I played lots of the arcadey stuff, the NFL Blitz, the NHL, what was it, Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey on the N64. I played a ton of that stuff, and even the RBI baseball on the NES. And I think that is actually interesting in the context of Adam's Apple Games, because you have such different games. In your short time publishing games, you have, let's see, a beer crafting game. You have a game all about food trucks. You have a game where you're building up swords, and now you're doing like this competitive Lotus farming, thriving game in Thrive. Like you're all over the place, man. Was that by intention, or did you just happen to acquire these games as the ones that you were going to put out into the world, or did you really want to sculpt this as a real diversified portfolio?
I don't think it was necessarily the intention when I started out to go after, diverse genres, player counts, and themes. But I latch on to kind of a brilliant game, and I say, like, that deserves to be made. And I may not be the best publisher to make it. I may not have all the 2-player abstract fans, or I may not have all the fantasy, lightweight fantasy fans. But I think it deserves a place in the marketplace. And to me, bringing it to life and creating a vision and seeing how I can kind of make my stamp or put my mark on the industry with these games I'm up to the challenge. Like, it's so much fun. I just want to bring, new artists, new designers, and new innovative mechanics in the industry as well. So really focusing on that as my core. And then the reality is, like, that pushes you in different directions.
Right. So getting back to the story and your chronology, around 2014, 15, you do this game design jam or competition, I guess, presentation. I don't know the best way to really define exactly what that was, but you do this and then you're working on game designs. When do you decide to start self-publishing your games and really going for it as a game publisher, capital G, capital P?
When I turned the switch on for my first game, Bruin USA, I thought of it as a game. I thought of it as its own brand. I didn't think of it necessarily as me being a publisher. And so that's where my head was at. I said, this thing needs to get made. And wouldn't it be cool if I could bring all these other craft breweries actually into the gaming space and, give them a voice? I thought that was a great marketing play as well. I think really where, like, I started thinking about publishing was after game was delivered to backers the first time. And I said, wow, like, people are actually playing a thing that I'm creating and they're giving me feedback on it. And it's real. Like, this is unsolicited. unbiased feedback that may be amazing. A lot of times it was awesome, but also sometimes it was pretty harsh, so putting yourself out there, that to me was, just this amazing realization. Now, where I turned that into publishing was when I said, hey, I really like doing this. Like, this is rewarding to me. What's next? I didn't necessarily have a game that was polished in the hopper, but I had a friend in town that did, and I really liked the theme. I thought about making a food truck game myself, and I said, this thing needs to exist. So we started working together, and was able to, really experience becoming a publisher for the first time. This was not my own game design, but now I was collaborating with somebody who had this vision, this idea, and then I was just painting it a beautiful picture.
Now that you've done both, do you have a preference for one or the other, design or publishing?
I love both. What I will say is, working with a designer, I feel like I have a lot less responsibility on my shoulder, because I can really rely on my designer to stay core to the vision. And, when some of these tough moments come up that test the vision of the design, they can weigh in and say, no, well, this is where my head is at. Like, as a designer, this is what I want the players to feel. Now, when you are the all-encompassing designer and publisher, which I've done twice now, holy crap, you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulder. And people are still, they want to engage. They want to give you a lot of feedback, which is great. And that is that's why I do this. But you have less people, that really are core and true with the design, that you can actually bounce that information off of and trust, right?
You seem like you're pretty naturally an entrepreneurial type guy. Is this something that you've done oftentimes in your life, where you just kind of take charge of a situation and make it come to reality? Or is this a new experience for you to grab the bull by the horns and say, I'm the guy calling the shots, going make this happen?
Yeah. Well, so I got the entrepreneurial bug when I went to a master's program off of college, or after college. And this just spurred this idea that I need to start something myself. And once I did it, like ideas were a dime a dozen back then. And we had so many cool ideas. I bounced around with friends. I talked with my brother. We had, some coworkers that we were talking about starting a new business. I think it was just a really kind of a happy solution or a happy, marriage going into the gaming industry with starting a new business, because, I think it fits me. Like, that's who I am as a person. I drive to try to complete projects, and I want to, make an impact and do new things. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of spiraling all over the place, but I'll bring it back in for a little bit there and say that, yes, I think that, it just feels natural in the gaming space and has an entrepreneurial mind.
Now, does this have like a big impact on your day-to-day life? Like, is this your full-time gig at this point, or is it your side gig? And what did your family think about that? What was everyone, looking at the sidelines going like, dude, he's really going all in on board games? Really? Yeah. The family has been surprisingly supportive. This is not my my full-time gig right now. I work full-time as a packaging engineer for a large retailer in the U.S. So it's actually kind of a natural fit, because they buy a bunch of stuff from China, and I help design packages for a bunch of stuff coming from China. And so where do board games often come from? China. And they're basically just a box of packaging, right? So yep. That's fascinating. You have to have the best inserts in the biz at this point. Now that you've said that, I'm going to expect that every insert is perfectly, immaculately designed.
It's so funny that you say that, because I come from packaging in this cost-cutting sense, and I really want to put something out that's efficient and functional. Mm-hmm. And it's all often an afterthought, because of the product creation takes so much time and energy to focus on not only the game design, but also the graphics, but also all the files. And then, like, at that point, you better have thought of your packaging well in advance of that. And oftentimes it's like, holy crap, well, we just stretch gold our way into so many things that now we need to really we need to pivot and find something that just works. For Bruin USA, I will say that box was pretty fascinating. It was kind of a tall box, like a Jenga box, right? But it had like a hole in the side to prevent box farts, and it kind of box vacuum, and you could just push it out from the side, and it was really neat experience. And you know what I found was super polarizing response from the audience. Half the people that backed the game loved it, and half the people hated it. They're like, this doesn't fit on my dang shelf. So I took a step back actually and just said, I'm just going to give you function. And it kind of depends where you're selling it too, because if you are going to make this beautiful and elaborate package that is not going to be in front of someone, it's just going to be kind of an unboxing experience. Like, you may have less incentive to put a lot of time and money and investment into that package versus something that may be drawing eyes at the retail shelf.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also the different spaces in which these things are going to be available. Like, for example, I'm thinking of Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert are in those, I guess, storied or notorious tin boxes that I love. And I love them too. They have the raised elements on the cover, and they're curved in ways. And I know a lot of people hate them because they're non-standard boxes, but those are games that can reasonably be sold at bookstores and toy stores where you might not see other games, and you want it to look like something that you just want to dive into. You're curious about it. You're not really thinking about, well, how is this fitting in with the uniform Kallax shelf space?
100% true. I mean, branding is a big deal in this world, and especially at the mass market. Like, you see so many different form factors on that board game wall at a retailer, at a mass market retailer, that you don't see at a hobby retailer or a specialty retailer where, your FLGS, right? Right. You see a lot of boxes there. But you'll see bags, and I saw something in a shoe the other day. Like, yeah. I could just wear that. What's that, size 10.5? We're good.
Yep.
I'll buy 2 of them.
I'll take 2. I need the pair, but hopefully they're not both. Hopefully they're not both right shoes. Now, I definitely want to talk about Thrive, because that's a game that's coming up on Kickstarter here very shortly. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Sword Crafters. I obviously am a huge JRPG guy. I did all the Final Fantasy, the Chrono Trigger, yes. All of it. It was all there. But Sword Crafters, I'll admit I haven't played it, but I adore the look, and I have the utmost admiration for the gall that it takes to make a game with physical components slotted together to make a 3D cardboard sword. What is the genesis of this game, and how did you convince yourself that this was a reasonable idea for anyone to pursue?
To be honest, I knew from the inception of the idea that it was a great idea. But what I didn't know at the time was how hard it was going to be to develop something that was not only a fun game, but also a brilliant and fantastic and innovative and three-dimensional product that you hold as you play. And wow. I mean, I don't know if the gaming industry was necessarily ready for it. I think they were like, what is that? Too much gimmick for my taste, pass. But all of a sudden it comes out and people feel it, and it's sturdy as heck. And they're like, holy crap, this game is not messing around. You feel that box, and it's like 3, 4, 5 pounds, depending on what edition you have. And it is like a bookcase full of cardboard. But we had to do that to get it to be really sturdy. So conceptually, take a step back, right? So you're playing this game, you start out with a sword hilt. As you play, you collect these tiles. The tiles get slotted together to form a three-dimensional sword that you hold as you play. You can leave it on the table, but the mechanics are also 3D as well. So you're trying to match up things on one side of the sword. Well, you'll very quickly learn as you play, when you put 2 tiles in, they go in parallel. Well, the next 2 go in perpendicular. So you can't always time up what you're trying to do unless you're thinking in the 3-dimension.
It's a bananas idea. That's all I can say. From a publisher standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a gamer standpoint of playing essentially a tile laying game in a 3D environment that is crafting the object that abstractly you're also crafting within the theme of the game. It's really cool, and I was astonished when I looked at that and I heard all the buzz about it. And I'll admit that my initial reaction was like, come on, this has got to be a gimmick. Like, this has got to be like some silly game that it's going to fall apart when you play it. It's going to, diminish the strategic quality of the game somehow at the expense, or rather the gimmick itself comes at the expense of the satisfying gameplay. Like, how big of a hurdle was it to overcome that with the audience? And was that something you were really worried about going in? You mentioned that the gaming hobby, the industry, the community might not have been ready for it at the time, but obviously it's been this success.
Well, I think one of the big challenges was that we came out on Kickstarter with it, and so only a limited amount of people could actually hold it and try it, just due to the nature of online sales, right? Mm-hmm. There were a lot of interested people in it, but I mean, even every reviewer we gave the game to, like, I gave them a prototype copy that was not finished. It wasn't fully developed in terms of the component quality that needed to be there, because to be honest, I was sat in my basement with a Dremel for hours and hours and hours, like dremeling up these cardboard tiles to fit together. And the component quality of the prototypes were very much that. So the doubt of it, I think, was very much it made sense. It was substantiated by the reviewers and the people that had tried it and played it. Was I expecting it? No, I did. This was something I should have expected going into the campaign. I didn't, and that took me off guard. What kept us going and what kept us true to the vision was we had a few really awesome moments in that campaign where, like, it was like day one, and it's like Jamie Stigmeyer was on board, and he reached out personally, and he's like, you know what, you might not be like really excited about where this project trajectory is, but I'm a day one backer. This is like one of the coolest ideas I've ever seen. He even asked for a copy and like highlighted it on one of his YouTube videos, which, I mean, starstruck, right? Like, any Kickstarter creator kind of has this, it gets a little starry eyed when you hear his name, or you see stuff that he's done. So there were a few big moments like that. And even after that, so now that the game's out, like the publishers, my gosh, have courted this game to try to localize it. And so I've been able to just take a step back and say, who does this best fit with? Not just what's the best, like where's the most money from? It's like, what is the relationship that I want to establish? And how do I gain a strong foothold now in Asia or in Europe, in even South America, all that. So I think the swords are starting to open doors, which I think is fascinating. And I don't know that I've like publicly announced this, but we're definitely doing more crafters games in the future. So we have games in the works. We have new objects that we want to create and bring to people's, and bring to the table, and they are imaginative as can be. So I'm excited about that.
They open doors as though they are keyblades.
Yeah, Keyblades there, and that would be a good Square game. What was that one? Kingdom Hearts, right?
That's it.
Keyblade. Okay.
Exactly. All right. Well, we got to talk about Thrive, because this is the game on the horizon, and this is the game that you originally contacted me about in seeing if we could do some coverage of. And in looking at your history, it kind of threw me for a loop, because you have these games that are immersive and thematic, and I don't necessarily think of a head-to-head abstract competitive game as fitting within that, and maybe that's the point of it. So when did this game come along, and why do you think this is the one that you really latched onto as your next project?
Yeah, I can talk about a fun story here. So this was at an event called Protospiel in local Minnesota, and this is where a bunch of local designers come and share their janky, ugly prototypes, and we're all looking for feedback on it. Everyone is bettering each other's games in this community. So great group of people in the Twin Cities, and wow, we have a lot of talented people here. This was late at night, maybe 9:30 p.m. The thing's wrapping up, and And one of the attendees says, "Hey, can I show you this game?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's play it. Let's talk about it. We could give you some feedback on it." He brings out kind of a box that has wrapped in a dirty T-shirt, and he puts the dirty T-shirt on the table, and the dirty T-shirt has grid lines on it. And then he brings out 12 wooden pieces that have a bunch of drill holes in them, and they're nicely sanded, and they have cribbage pegs. And he says, well, basically, it's pretty simple. You move a piece, and you place 2 pegs. When you land on an opponent's piece, you capture it. The player that has 1 piece remaining on the board loses. And so all of a sudden, like 2 moves later, I'm powering up this massive piece that, starts out kind of as a pawn in chess. So it can only move 1 space forward. But after 2 moves, now I can basically cover the entire board. And now I'm in his back line. And so, my gosh, like I was feeling so clever. I was setting up these forks where I'm putting 2 of his pieces in check, or, threatening 2 of his pieces. And he's trying to defend us the entire time too. So what's amazing about this game? So it totally fits an abstract mold of like 2 players, kind of a chess-like game, totally inspired by the Duke, Onitama, games like that. So games that now I've played and really love. But wow, does this make you feel smart, feel clever? And it is, and wow, is it so easy to pick up and learn. So to me, this takes a game like chess and says, throw it out the window. I mean, I love chess. I know there's so much competitive games around about it, but I just don't play it a lot because there's a barrier to entry. And I think there's like kind of some stigma around different player, skill levels and all that. So to me, this one breaks through that, and it does it with such an easy and smooth learning curve, but yet still gives you all those great feelings.
That's interesting. Not to derail this with talk about another game or designer, but I was talking with Gordon Hamilton, who designed Santorini, and I can't remember if we actually talked about this on the podcast itself or if we just talked about it while we were hanging out at Dice Tower Con 2017.
Awesome.
Yes, 2017, which was one of the highlights of the con. Is I just was chatting with this guy behind me in line who seemed nice. He had a cool accent, and we were just chatting about where we were from. And it turns out it's the Santorini designer who just had this hit game. And because we kind of established this rapport before, we were talking about like, oh, I'm a podcaster, and oh, I'm this guy making this game. We just kind of identified each other as people who would like to hang out. And so for the majority of the convention, he and I were playing games and just talking about all kinds of stuff and life and mathematics. But he is so interested in abstract games and the history of them. And he showed me this huge chart that he brought in like a poster tube that is the history and development of modern gaming. And in particular, he was interested in the history and development of abstract games. And he was telling me, like, Jack, chess, in all honesty, it's kind of a terrible game. It has such a control over humanity because of its length of time that it's been around. But when you think about it, it has so many rule exceptions. It has such a barrier to entry. It's difficult to learn, and the skill ceiling is such that it's very punishing to beginners, that it disincentivizes them to win or to play, because the likelihood of winning against someone who's even moderately more experienced than them is so incredibly slim. And he wasn't necessarily talking up Santorini at the time, though that's what he was trying to achieve with that game. I think
Sure.
He was more so trying to compare this to something like Go, which is immediately understandable. It has a significant skill ceiling, but you are able to engage with the game as a comprehensive player, not necessarily the strategy, but the full rule set so quickly, and it's so much more elegant and intuitive. And that for some reason contextualize abstract games for me in a way that I hadn't thought about in a long time, because I honestly fell out of love with chess ages ago. I mean, I'll play it with my family if they want to play it. Sure, I'll be happy to play chess, but I'm not going to pursue it. And that, I think, is what has made me much more open to some of the more modern abstract games that you mentioned were inspirations for this. Now, bringing it back to your game Thrive and also Santorini, which made a recent huge splash around 2017 as this really, really easily understood abstract game that was a crossover hit. What about your game do you think would be of interest and accessible and bring in people who aren't necessarily into these head-to-head abstract games anymore?
That was my job as a publisher, seeing this game and saying, how do we make this accessible? Because I see how accessible the rules and the gameplay that all is, but I want to make it very approachable as a game and as a product. So instead of its former name, which was Eigenstate, which is a very mathematical, German, very abstract name.
Listen, from someone who had a band in high school named Strictly Monotonic, I get it.
That's awesome. And so I had to kind of find a way to present something that fit the feeling of the game, that made it approachable. And so we searched around for ideas. We came up with a lot of different theme ideas, and the one that so resonated with me was, resulted literally from a Google search. And I said, what types of things have a lot of holes in them? And what popped up was this really fascinating looking lotus seed pod. So I dug into this guy a little bit more. I said, does this have a possibility to become the theme for the game? And the more I looked at it, the more fascinated I was with this plant. It is one of the most historical, symbolic plants, and it has so much interesting, story and detail behind it. So this plant grows up from the mud. It pops, out of the water. It blooms. It actually goes back into the water overnight, pops up again in the morning, and it symbolizes purity and all that. So there's just this really cool story along with it. So how do we then craft this into a story or a game or something that someone wants to play? So what's really cool is I think that the mechanics also really fit these fit the theme as well. So as you move your game pieces, it is essentially growing your piece's capability to be able to do stuff in the game, so you can move more places, right? And then I also kind of have this hypothesis to say that you just marry up a strong theme, a really cool theme with great art, with a great gameplay, that you're going to have a very strong product. And so that's where this one is netting out right now. We went after really interesting and unique art style and color palette. And you've seen kind of how the pieces and the pegs look. Well, we haven't released our 3D modeler's his stuff yet. So I'm super excited to paint this picture and bring such a unique looking game to this market. And I hope it resonates. It's always a big question mark, but so far people that have played it really love it. So.
Well, that's interesting. The you hope it resonates, that it's always a risk, that you're always questioning whether or not something is going to be successful. I think a great way of concluding this is to look at your career, having done several Kickstarters at this point, and you're right on the precipice of another. What's something that you've really learned over the last Kickstarters that you've done that you're planning on implementing or applying into this current one? I mean, they're not necessarily similar games, but surely some of the wisdom that you've gained along to this point is applicable to this campaign. That's
a great question. So what I've learned that I want to bring into the Thrive campaign is to design a product for the Kickstarter market instead of designing a product for the retail market. And so what I mean by that is, if you want a game that's going to sell well in retail, it needs to kind of fit this game weight versus price. There are bubbles that it needs to fit in, right? To design a game for the Kickstarter market, though, is a completely different task, because you don't necessarily need to hit a quantity or a volume or a MSRP that fits into that bubble. The really cool thing about abstract games too is that they're sort of modular, and so you can add really cool, new, and interesting ideas on top of them fairly easily. And so we have some things coming down the pipeline that expand upon like this beautiful, elegant 2-player game that, just like Santorini did, like innovated with all these god powers, right? So there's like 50 now god powers that you can choose from. And I think that draws a certain person, a certain gamer in to say, like, wow, this game's incredible. Like, I can play this so many different ways. Now, not everyone plays that way. Some people will stay true to the core and play it 1v1. But I think that's where I would say that's what I've learned is that, like, I need to figure out a way to craft a game that is fit for Kickstarter and not just put a game out because Kickstarter is a way to raise funds for a game. So I really think about, does this make sense to go onto a crowdfunding platform or not, based on the incentive structures and the amount of things I can add and tweak and upgrade within the realm of the actual game. A lot of component quality going through on this one, so it's going to be really great to see.
If you could, would you bypass Kickstarter?
I think there is a I would make a case for it. I would make a case for it for sure. I don't think it would be as strong of a product, to be honest, because I think we're going to be able to push into a better component quality. And in general, I try to make that happen across all games. Like, as soon as a stretch goal hits, a certain tier, like, all the games get it. Well, I'm reevaluating that a little bit. And so, like, is there something that maybe is more positioned for Kickstarter, and then whatever comes out to retail is not that upgraded thing? So we'll see how that goes. I mean, that'll all come through on like the project page and all that, but it's certainly something I've been thinking about. I don't think I'm financially ready to start bypassing Kickstarter, and I think it's got so much marketing potential as well. But that being said, like, it's so competitive, right? So, like, there will be a ton of awesome games out when Thrive hits, and so it's always a tough choice for someone that is interested in a new game to say, like, why this one versus something else. I hope we bring something that is so component unique, so simple to learn, that hopefully that you'll be able to play not just for the next 2 to 3 years because it's thematically on point, but for a lifetime, because this game is really going to deliver.
Let's get to one last bit of squishy stuff.
Sure.
You're about to do this Kickstarter. You've done Kickstarters in the past. Are you still anxious? Is there still a part of you that's like, oh God, this is terrifying, and I have butterflies in my gut as I'm just about to pull the trigger on this? What is the resonating worst part of going through this process where you're just finally putting yourself out there?
Absolutely. I mean, my gosh, there are some things that just, the brain will make you procrastinate on, no matter what it is. And so for me, it is like, when I need to send out an email to my fans, like, I love interacting with people. But for whatever reason, like, sending out that email is psychologically taxing on my brain. And so a lot of that happens during the Kickstarter, Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I still get super nervous. I think one thing I've learned and will be hopefully implementing this time is just to set expectations and rip out the carpet of expectations and just say, whatever happens, happens. Like, I really want to make this game and it deserves to be made, but we're not going to expect a certain goal or a certain level or a certain number of backers. Like, this is kind of a risky product. It's a pretty, 2-player abstracts can be kind of niche. I've done everything I can to really open this up and be super approachable, but at the same time, it can be a very niche market.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're going to end this on a positive note then. What is the best aspect? What is the best feeling in that Kickstarter, or just in general as the publisher of a game? What is the thing that you are looking forward to and just is the fulfillment of everything that you've been working on?
I had a comment come through on a Kickstarter on Swordcrafters, actually, and this has been fulfilled for a long time. And so someone just popped in and said, literally just popping in, "This game's great. Thank you. Bye." like little stuff like that it it makes all the nervousness or anticipation. It so makes it worth it. And so I love bringing new things to life. I hope people resonate with them as well. But we got a pretty good track record, and we're continuing to get better and better. So I'm excited to bring Thrive to life very soon.
That's awesome. And I totally get that. Just a little compliment here or there, a little feedback. For all of you in the audience, that is a word that you should hold on to, is feedback, especially positive feedback, because content creators out there in general, when we're interacting on the internet, we get the negative feedback. If someone feels passionately about a game in a negative way, they will feel empowered to go out there and say it. But also, if you really dig something, just something as simple as, hey dude, rad game, then that can make a world of difference. So, we all have a nice positive lesson at the end of this. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, Adam. Do you have any information for people to find more about Adam's Apple Games?
Yeah, you can find more at adamsapplegames.com. If you want to learn about Thrive, we'll have a page there as well. And hopefully, thanks so much for having me on, Jack. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show, and good luck with the Kickstarter for Thrive. It's going to be on the Kickstarter at the end of February. Thanks again for coming on the show, Adam.
Thank you for helping me spread the word, too. It's been great.
As always, the Cardboard Herald is a completely free service focused on spotlighting games, gamers, and game creators. You can find all of our podcasts, including the Cardboard Herald and TCbH reviews, on iTunes, Stitcher, and our website. For more recommendations and reviews, you can also head over to our YouTube channel. We do not pay to advertise the show, so please continue spreading the word, following, liking, rating, and doing all the social media things. It truly does help us out a ton. If you'd like to drop us a line and maybe have your listener mail read on air, find us on Twitter at Cardboard Herald, or send us an email to cardboardherald@gmail.com, or click the contact link on our page. Once again, thank you for listening. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald, and you keep on gaming.